Hello guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video, we're going to continue with building our job board application, right? Continue with our backend. So in this video, we're going to be working on the application, right? So as you can see, the application is going to have like the ID, and then we have the accepted, which is going to be a boolean, right? So this accepted is going to tell the user if the application is accepted or rejected. And then we are going to have a foreign key, which is the company, which is going to identify the company that uploaded the vacancy. And we also have the user, right, which is also going to identify the user that also sent the application. And then we also have the resume, right? So the resume, which is going to identify the resume the user sent. And then we also have like the vacancy, right? So without wasting much of that time, let's start building our backend, right? Okay, so now let's go inside our model folder right here, and then let's create an application model. Application model.js, right? So what I'm simply going to do is I'm just going to copy our resume model right here, right? Because most of the things are going to be similar. So I'm just going to copy our resume model, and then I'm just going to paste it inside our application model. So let's change this from resume schema to application schema. And then let's also change this from resume to application. All right, let's change this to application, right? Like this. And then let's change this to application schema also. Application schema, right? Like this. All right. So now what we simply have to do is we need to change we have a status. Right, so our status is going to be of type string, right? It's going to be of type string, and then required is not true. So what we simply need, we need a default value for this status, right? So the default is going to be pending, right? Since when a user sends the application, we want it to be pending, and then we are just going to create an enum type with different variables, right? So the first one is going to be pending, accepted, and then rejected, right? So those are the three variables that we want, right, for our status. And then now we need the company, right? So for the company, it's going to be sort of like a foreign key, right? The type is going to be mongoose. The type is going to be mongoose.schema.types object ID required. Yes, it's going to be true. It's going to reference our company model, right? It's going to just reference our company model. And then the next one that we need the resume. And then it's also going to be of type object ID required true. And then the reference is going to point out to the resume schema, right, to our resume model. And then we also need the user ID also. It's going to be also a mongoose schema types.object ID, right? And then we need the vacancy ID. So it's also going to be a type of object ID. Required is equal to true. It's going to reference the vacancy right here. So here we need to change this from resume ID to application ID. Right, so now we are done with the application section with our application model. Now what we just simply need to do is let's go inside our controller. Let's create an application controller.js. All right, so let's create an application controller.js. So we need application, and then we are simply going to get it from the controller, and then application, no, we are going to get it from the model, right? Model, and then application model, right? Like this. And then the next thing that we need right here is the vacancy model, right? We need the vacancy model. It's going to come from require model, vacancy model, right there, right? And then now what we need is a module.exports, right? And then we need to create, first we need to create an application, right? It's an async function, texting the request, the response, request, response, and then what we are going to need is we are going to need a vacancy ID, resume, company, and then we also need the user ID. So these are going to come from the request.body. Okay, and then first thing we need to check if the application already exists, right? Application exists. This goes to await application, right? We're going to await application, find one. So an application exists, right? For an application to exist, that means that the vacancy ID will already be inside our application. So we want to say the vacancy ID is going to be equal to the vacancy ID, right? If we have a vacancy ID inside our application schema, then that application already exists, right? That means that the user has already applied for that vacancy, right? So now we are going to check if application exists, right? So that means if the application exists, right, then we are going to just return a response.setup code 400 with application already exists, right? And then if that application doesn't exist, now we are just going to check if we have the vacancy, we have the vacancy ID, the resume, company, then user ID, and then if one of them doesn't exist, we are just going to show a status code 400 with all fields are required, right? After this, what we simply need to do is we simply need to create a try catch block, right? So we are just going to catch an error, right? If an error exists, what we are simply going to do is we are going to return status code 500 with internal server error, right? And then let's create a new application, right? New application, which is equals to await new application, right? And then we just need to you just need to pass in the request.body, right? Request.body, right? Just need to provide the request.body. Then we are simply going to save the application, right? New application.save right there. And then after this, we are just going to return a response.status code 201 with application created successfully, right? So that's it for creating our application. Now the next method that we need is for getting application, get application by vacancy ID, right? Get application by vacancy ID. So it's going to be an async to take in a request and then a response, right? And then what we need here is we need an ID which is going to come from which is going to come from request.params.id, right? And then after that, let's create a try catch block, and then let's create a catch to just catch any error, right? And then what we are simply going to do here and say constant application is equal to await, right? So we just need to await application dot find, and then we are just going application dot find by vacancy ID. We are going to find it by vacancy ID, and then we are just going to populate the resume and then the company user ID, and then also I think we can populate we are just going to the company. Let's just populate let's remove the resume, resume, and then user ID. I think user ID. So let's just populate the company, right? Let's just populate only the company. So the path. So we need the path. The path is going to be company, and then from this company, what we need to select different variables, right? So we are just going to select. We're just going to select the name, address, logo, email, right? And then email, like this. And then I think we can also do, let's check the company schema. I think we can also do for phone number. Yeah, I think we might actually need phone number. Okay, and then I think we can also populate. Let's populate. We can also populate, I think, user ID. User ID, and then we can also populate resume and then vacancy ID. Yeah, also this. Okay, so now that we are done with this, what we can simply do is now we can return res.status res.status 200, right? And then .json, and then we'll simply pass in the application. All right. So yeah. So now we can simply pass in the application like this. Okay, now we got application by vacancy ID, and then the next thing that we need to do also is to get applications by user ID. So let's just copy this right here. Let's paste it below, and then let's change to get by user ID. User ID. So we are going to change this to user ID like this. Okay, user ID, and then all right. So let's just to make this need, let's just put in a new line so that becomes readable. Okay, so we are just going to populate. So here I'm just going to put curly brackets here, and then I'm going to say path resume. Okay, so we're supposed to be inside curly brackets path resume, and then so here path user ID, path user ID, and then we also have path for the vacancy ID. Okay, right here. All right, so I think we also need to do the same here because we might end up getting an error. So okay, so let's repeat inside the curly brackets. Then so this will be path and then path. All right, so get user by application, and then we also want to get applications by. So here we need to change this to user ID. Okay, which is correct. Also, we also want to get applications by company ID. So I want to get applications whereby if a user applies to a certain company, so we just want to get those by company ID. So let's change this to company. Yeah, company right there. And then I think everything else is just the same. Everything else is just the same. And then the other thing that we need is we need to update the application status, right? So before we do that, let's just delete an application. So can a user delete an application? Remove an application? Yeah. Okay, let's do it. Delete user application. String. So we need an ID, which is going to come from request.params.id, right? And then we need a status, which is going to come from request.body right there. And then let's do a try catch block, right? Try catch block, and then let's catch any error. Right. Okay, yeah, internal server error. And then what we simply need to do here is let's create a variable for applications. This goes to await. So application dot find and delete, not update. Let's change this to delete. And then I want to delete from user. User ID, right? I'm using user ID. And then if it's successful, what we're just going to do is res.status 200 application deleted successfully, right? And then we also need another method for updating the status, right? Because as you can remember, our default status is going to be pending, but we want a situation where we can update the status. So update application update application status, which is going to take in an async method. We need a request, a response, and then what we are simply doing here, we need an ID. We need an ID which is going to come from request.params.id, and then status which is going to come from the request.body, right? So now we are just going to check our status right there. If any of the values coming from the request.body are not equal to pending, right, accepted and rejected, and then we dot includes, right? So what we are simply going to do is we are just going to return a response to code forwarded invalid status, right? And then after this, let's just remove this item. And then after this, what we are just going to create a try catch block, right? And then we create an application which is going to await find by ID and update, right? And then we update using the ID, and then status, we replace the status, right? And then we pass in new to true, right? And then what we can simply do is if there is no application, right? Somehow we want to check if the application doesn't exist, right? We'll just alert the user that the application is not found, right? So that's it for our application controller. We created the method for creating an application, getting application by vacancy ID, getting application by company ID. So what this populate method does in Mongoose is you can see that inside our application here, we have the company, resume, user ID, and then vacancy ID. As you can see, if you think of this in SQL, it's more of like the foreign keys, right? So what this populate does is it allows us to populate information from our user schema, right? Our user schema, information from this user schema, and then information from the resume schema, right? That is our user resume, as you can see, like this, right? So now that we are done, let's move on to our application route. So let's create an application route, application route.js, right? So I'm just going to copy the resume route here, and then I'm just going to paste it here, and then let's change this to application control, and then let's make sure let's go to application controller, application control. Now that we are done with the application controller, so I can easily go inside our route, right? And then here I'm just going to change this to application controller dot create application, and then here application controller dot get application by vacancy ID, right? And then we also need a get method, also a get method, and then it's going to be application dot get application by user ID. Let's copy it again, right? Let's copy this, and then get application dot get application by vacancy ID. We have already gotten by vacancy ID by user ID, so by company ID right there. And then for the delete, just say application controller dot delete application, right? And then we also have another method for updating, which is a page, right? So we are done with this. And then now let's go inside our server.js. Let's import the application route. Application route is goes to application route, and then here let's app.use application route, right? Now that we are done, let's try to create an application, right? So applications, okay. Let's post method. What do we need for an application? We need the company ID. So let's try to get a company ID. Login company. So let's just say log in company like this. Post request. Okay, so it's supposed to be API login company, and then let's get the company ID, right? Yes, the company ID, copy, and then let's change this from resume to company. It's going to be text. Let's paste it, and then we also need a resume. So let's change this to resumes. Let's try to get a resume. Access denied, no. Okay, so first let's try to log in, or let's try to get a user token, because our routes are protected, right? So resumes, vacancies, resumes, and then authorization. We need a bearer token, and then let's paste this right there. Let's try to get right. So we've gotten our resume ID right there, and then resume, and then now we need a user ID. So the user ID, will get it from our login right here. So I'm just going to copy this user ID, paste it here. The last thing we need is the vacancy. Vacancy ID. So if we, and then vacancies. Let's try to get vacancies. You have a missing field. Oh, okay, supposed to get. So somehow cannot set header after they are sent to client. Okay, I think our server just crashed. Let's try to run it again. So npm start. So we're getting the vacancy model. There's something going on. Cannot override vacancy once called. Vacancy model once compiled. So let's go to our vacancy model. Let's see what's going on. So I think there's nothing going on here. I think it might be inside our application controller 220. So we're getting an error. It's coming from here in application.save. So let's try to just remove this and then let's try to run our save again. Okay, so it might be due to our we made a typo inside our route file. So application route dot update application status, right? Update application status, and then here we need to delete user application, right? Like this. So it made a typo there. So let's try to run and let's see. Okay, now our server is running on port 6030. Now let's go back to our, let's try to get our vacancies, right? Okay, so now let's grab a vacancy ID right here. Okay, let's go back to our resumes and then vacancy ID, let's paste it, right? And then let's try to post it. And then saying all fields are required. So let's check which field is missing inside our application controller. We need a vacancy ID. We need a vacancy ID, resume, company. Do we have a company? Let's check. Okay, I made a typo. It's supposed to be company. So let's, and then resume, user ID. Also, I made a typo. It's supposed to be capital letter I. Alright, so let's try to send it. Still getting. So I think let's try to stop the server and run it again. Alright. So it's saying all fields are required. So let's try choose the row or something. I don't know what happens with field. So let's try to use the row. So let's just go inside the form data. Let's just copy the company. Let's just copy company here. Let's paste it and then let's grab the value body row company. So let's copy the company right here, copy company, and then go, let's paste the company right there. And then what we can simply do is let's copy this item, copy and then paste it below. Alright, so now we need resume, and then let's paste the resume, and then also need user ID, and then user ID, and then vacancy ID. Right, so let's go for a resume, user ID. Let's copy the user ID and then let's paste it. Then let's also grab the vacancy ID right there. And then let's paste it, and then let's try. So it's saying company resume is ID. So are we missing something? Because we have the vacancy ID, we have the resume, company, user ID, we have all the fields. Let's check the route. Fit application, so everything is there. Right, so I managed to fix. It was not an error, but I think I was having problems with using the form data, right? So I just decided to create row in JSON objects, right? So we have the vacancy ID, resume, company, and then user ID. So if I send a request, you are seeing it is telling us that application already exists. So if I pull out our backend, let's check our backend. Right, so if we go into our application controller, if you still remember, right, we have the application controller here. So let's go into creating an application, right? So we know that an application exists when the vacancy ID already exists. That means that the user is already applied for that vacancy, right? So that means that in this case, we need to change our vacancy ID since we have already applied for this vacancy, right? So let's go and then let's try to get more vacancies, right? So let's try to grab another vacancy ID. So let's grab this vacancy ID right here. Let's grab this vacancy ID right here, and then let's go back and then let's change the vacancy ID, right? So as you can see, once I change the vacancy ID, now we are getting application created successfully, right? So now what we basically need to do is let's try to get the application. So if we move into application route, right, we want to get application by vacancy ID, right? So let's just copy this right here. Let's copy it, and then let's go back to our Postman, right? So let's just paste this right there. And then let's grab the vacancy ID, right? And then let's paste it here. And then let's try to get vacancy. So somehow we are getting an error, get application by vacancy ID. Somehow we are getting an error. So let's check what's causing the error. Get application by vacancy ID, and then provide the vacancy. Application by vacancy ID. Okay, so applications dot get application by vacancy ID. So I think it's because okay guys, so the reason why we're getting an error when trying to retrieve certain applications is because we forgot to put this /, right? So make sure you put the / here, / and then / and then the parameter, right? So now if we go back to our Postman, let's go back to Postman, right? And then we'll go to get applications by company ID, and then we place in the company ID. You can see now we have gotten the applications that the company has received. The first application has been accepted, the other one is pending, right? And then we can also get application by user ID. That means that the applications that the user is sent, right? So let's get application by user ID. You can see that this user has sent 2 applications, right? The first one, this one, has sent 1 application, which is still pending, right? So we can change this application status to what? To accepted or rejected. So what I'm just going to do is, let's go here and then applications, let's go to body, and then let's go to row, and then we are just going to type in status. So our status is going to be rejected, and then we need to change this from post to page, right? So if we send this to, and then here we forgot, we need the application ID. As you can see, access denied, no token provided, so we need to get a token. So let's go to the company, and then let's get the token right there, and then let's go back to our page, and then authorization, it's going to be a bearer token, and then let's just paste it there. As you can see, application status updated successfully. So if we go back to our to this user, right, get applications by user ID, this application was pending. As you can see now, the application status is changed to rejected, right? So you can now play along with other endpoints, right? And then you make sure that you just change these values, right? So that was it, guys, for the application section. In the next video, we are going to be retrieving the user data.